person, and for the first time I actually realised that I can actually have my own thoughts and feelings and choices. That may sound absurd to some people, but for a long time I wasn't aware of that, and I can now embrace a future and embrace hope and resilience.
And with the organisation Adults Surviving Child Abuse, is it that kind of unconditional acceptance that is a key to what you can offer individuals who've experienced abuse? I know you work with professionals as well.
Well, I think for all survivors it's about being heard and being listened to, and overcoming that sense of shame and self-blame that children take on when they're abused, and that often continues very inappropriately into adult life. But we still have a society, very sadly, that stigmatises the whole issue of abuse, and we hear all the time from people ringing our 1300 line about people telling them to just get over it, get on with it. Yes, over time you can come to understand it, and it will always be a part of you, and it will stop ruling you, but it's not as simple as just getting on with it and getting over it. You have to process it, and you have to come to terms with it.
Tell us about your husband and children, because I had the sense that their support was almost as influential on your recovery as your therapist.
Look, obviously very critical to have a family there and close friends, and sadly a lot of survivors don't have that. A lot of survivors are very isolated, because when you are a child who's been abused, you're very alone, and it's very easy to go back into that childhood space of being alone. So I was really very fortunate to have that support, and as you say, to have a family who was there for me. But obviously they've gone through their own process, and together as a family we've gone through obviously an enormously challenging process.
Your mother was a very different experience, and you talk a lot about your mother and the fact that she's a Holocaust survivor,
yes,
and a survivor of trauma herself.
Yes.
What was the hardest thing about your mother's reaction to what you were saying about your father and your other experiences?
Look, it's obviously very difficult, because my mother's experience is an experience that is unimaginable. I mean, she's suffered unimaginable trauma, and I understand that. But for me as a child, it was very difficult, because she was unable to be there for me. She was unable to be empathic. And similarly in my recovery, she was also unable to validate. She didn't validate. She was not there for me. So that was really the same story, and at some point I had to accept that would never change. She is a product of what happened to her, as I am, and that's how it is. As someone said to me, and it was probably a very valuable thing, your mother is blind in that way, and you're sitting around waiting for her to see it's not going to happen. And like any child, you hope that your parents will be there, and as an adult child you also hope that at some point you do have to let go of it.
You come across now, Cathy, as so rational and so calm, and the book
I did pay a lot for therapy.
Well, indeed. But where has the fury gone? I mean that really seriously. I mean, anger can be such a debilitating emotion.
There was a period where I did, and don't leave the room, I did understand homicidal rage. I really did, because the fury was just so intense. But as I say, I have worked through it. I do understand. I mean, I don't think you can ever understand really why someone abuses, but I understand it to the best of my ability, and I have been able to let go of that rage and move on.
In a way, that throwaway line about investing in therapy, it's not funny at one level, is it? Only in the sense that those of us who've benefited from really good quality talking and listening therapies know that time is important, and it can cost a lot. Even with private health insurance, there's a gap.
Yes, yeah.
And is it one of the great inequities that you must face in your work with adults surviving child abuse, that people must come to you who cannot afford that?
And I've been very privileged in that way, which is why I do the work I do, because I have been privileged with the resources to get a lot of therapy, with an education, with the ability now to be able to speak and talk, where a lot of survivors don't have the voice, don't have the capacity, don't have the support. And one thing our organisation is doing is really talking to government about trauma, because even with the supposed mental health reforms that are proposed, there's still not any provision for addressing people who've experienced what we call complex trauma, the trauma of childhood abuse, because when you're abused in those crucial developmental stages of childhood, it can potentially affect lots of aspects of your your development and your functioning. But the good news is that we know that people can and do recover. The brain science that people have been talking about, we know that people can get better, but we need the services, and the government is still not on board with that.
Some of you will have seen media coverage over the last 48 hours about an inquiry into the child protection system in Victoria, with estimates that 1 in 4 of children born this week will be the subject of a notification if the current rate of notification of concern for abuse continues. I mean, it's almost an impossible piece of information to take on board, but a Supreme Court judge and a woman called Dorothy Scott, and a very experienced social worker who's internationally renowned for her work in child protection, were part of the board that made that finding. Why I raise this is, even as I read your book, there was a part of me that didn't want to know. I'm an ambassador for an organisation that's about child abuse, but it is awful in the full meaning of that word. It is very hard to actually delve into this and understand the incidents and the severity of some individual experiences such as your own. What can we do about that almost visceral desire to go la, 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 la?
Yeah, look, I mean, all we need to do is look at the prevalence of it. I mean, we know that there are over more than 2 million adults who've experienced some form of abuse and neglect, and still we have this collective denial and stigma. It's about us all understanding and overcoming that gut reaction, that fear, overcoming the ignorance, and learning that you know, we need to be there as human beings to support one another. Children are vulnerable; they're inherently vulnerable, and yet, you know, there are some people who take advantage of that vulnerability. All human beings can be vulnerable. We're all the same, so we just need to be there to understand, to reach out, and to support one another.
We have a moment left. Just tell us what adults surviving child abuse, what do you do? What forums do you run? And if people wish to get information or support?
Yes, look, we run a 1300 line where people can ring up and talk to one of our therapists for support. We run workshops for survivors, training programs for health professionals around trauma-informed care and how to really listen to their clients and understand how to respond. We also advocate on a very big scale with government. So our website's aska.org.au, and you're welcome to donate anytime.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to begin by thanking Cathy's 2 children who are here supporting their mum today, and I ask you also to thank Dr. Cathy Kezelman.
Thank you.
We have 3 more truly remarkable speakers to bring you this afternoon, and the first is Andrew O'Keefe. Andrew designs workplaces that are based on human instincts, and indeed he's worked with the chimpanzee researcher Jane Goodall, whom many of you may have seen at an earlier conference. He's worked with her talking to business people about social instincts within the workplace. The name of his latest book, and indeed the name of his company, is Hardwired Humans. Please welcome Andrew O'Keefe.
Thank you, Julie, and thanks, Beth and your team, for the invitation to join you to share my passion about a vehicle to create happier workplaces. Our happiest moments at work are related to people. Our unhappiest moments at work are also related to people. And here's the challenge, that through the long journey of human history, it's only just recently, in 250 years in the Western world, and many cultures are still transitioning through this transition of moving beyond being hunter-gatherers and villagers to work in workplaces as we know them today. So offices and factories and banks, insurance companies, government offices are not our natural habitat. We're designed for a different environment in which we now find ourselves. But that also provides the opportunity, if we know what are the basic instincts that come with being born human, then A, we're no longer ignorant of them, B, we have a predictability about why we and others behave and think the way we do at work, and C, most excitingly, we can make wiser choices. If we asked everybody here today, let's say people who work in largish workplaces, or for others, friends and family who talk about their workplaces. And if we asked everybody, what are some of the frustrating, unhappy experiences that you have at work, we would find, irrespective of organisation, irrespective of industry, irrespective of country, the list is uncannily similar from one organisation to another. Think about the things that you share at night when you come home. Darling, you won't believe what happened today. Or that close friend and relative who shares with you, often in the whinging form, you can't believe what my boss just did today. If we polled everybody, we would find that sure enough, these sorts of things and many others will be on the list. In our organisation, we see a lot of petty politics, internal rivalries and silos. In our organisation, oh my goodness, the boss throws their weight around. My experience at work might be, gee, I've been really quick I've been judged really quickly, but likewise I might have judged others rather quickly. And we heard about this morning the importance of suspending judgment. In our organisation, our performance appraisal system doesn't work very well, and those of us in HR are redesigning it one more time, or if you're a boss, the unhappiest moment generally at work is anticipating the performance review of one of your colleagues, or of course if we're a staff member, it's the least satisfying of the conversations we have each year. And in our organisation, you wouldn't believe the power of the informal grapevine, and it's faster and more reliable than the formal channels. Now, if these observations are common, which they clearly are across organisations, they're not explainable at your workplace or your son, daughter, uncle, aunt's workplaces. They're only explainable because they're common around the world if we identify the common attribute, which of course is that we all employ and work with humans. So ever so recently we moved from, if we were born human, into an environment, nomadic hunter-gatherers, villages, which for that long journey of human history has been our experience. They're the formative years, and then suddenly we get born and we move into workplaces, which can be quite foreign and quite contrary to our instincts. And what's happened is that, so my great-nephew Hugo, who comes in the world born a member of our species, there's a whole suite of behaviour that he doesn't have to learn. So he's clearly a member of a learning species. He learns a lot. He's got a lifetime of learning ahead of him. But there's also a suite of behaviour that he doesn't have to learn that comes naturally. Now, I should say at the outset that we're not limited. When we talk, and Julie introduced around hardwired, it's not that we're absolutely limited to our natural tendencies, but actually, more excitingly, if we're no longer ignorant of them, then we have an explanation and a working framework. So what's happened is that this is really our natural habitat. In this individual surviving with family, close relatives within a clan on the savannah, in this case in the Himba tribe in Namibia, West Africa above South Africa. But in this nanosecond of the journey of the human history, we've moved into this sort of state. Separated this person's grandparents in the industrial revolutions and Midlands of England. As I say, in many cultures, this transition is still happening. We moved into offices and factories. So just to make, I guess, concrete just one example of this jump from the savannah to workplaces, the building block of human societies is based on small family units of about 7 within a clan of up to about 150. Now, if we jumped into workplaces and largish workplaces, then we would find that to be most functional and happy, that is, to appeal to the natural energy of humans, we would design our workplaces based on small teams of about 7. And that we would know that if we designed an organisation with asking mere mortal human managers to manage 12, 13, 14, 20, 25, 30 people, then we've designed dysfunction and unhappiness into that organisation, and we would fight against human nature. Likewise, if we have really small teams, it's not large enough to feel a sense of identity with intimate others. And then within our clan of 150, which comes linked to our brain size, that in organisations that grow to 80, 100 sort of people, suddenly the old hands will say, when it gets to about 80 to 100, it's not as friendly as it used to be. There's the entrepreneur founders will say, there's someone I just saw in the corridor, I think they work here, I don't know who they are. We're getting to that point of tolerance linked to the human brain and our connections that we can productively have. Now, we can learn a lot about one social species, being us, because Hugo comes into the world a member of a social species, by comparing and contrast to another. And my favourite example is the chimpanzee, because their social structures are so similar to ours. I'll just give one example in the time that we've got. So one of the observations that the fantastic Dr. Jane Goodall made when she moved into the forests in 1960 in Gombe in Tanzania was it didn't take long to realise that chimps like us are hierarchical, and in their case, led by an alpha male. If we're talking about another chimp species, bonobos, then we would say they're always led by an alpha female. Now, I just want to do a comparison between one fantastic constructive leader of the Gombe group, which is this individual called Figan. And some years ago when I first met Dr. Goodall, I said, tell me about Figan, who, from an organisational leadership perspective, seemed to be, if you were a chimp, you would want to live in a community led by Figan. And she said he was absolutely, the Gombe group was the most productive, stable, harmonious when Figan was the leader. And she said what it was that he was really powerful but not intimidating. She said what the observable behaviour was that if one individual was what we might say mistreating another, Figan had the power to discipline that individual. And she said it was almost as though they worked out that they would be in danger of copping his wrath. And so they didn't. They got on well together and lived in what she called social harmony. Some years later, Figan's nephew, Frodo, became the leader, and this seems to be a true-to-life capture of Frodo. I said he seemed at the other end of the spectrum. And this might make sense with some bosses that you know or your family talk about, that Frodo was an absolute tyrant. And he led by brute force and bullying. And what's interesting, a couple of things. One, that the constructive leaders of chimps tend to last as a leader in the wild for about 10 years. The bullies, the tyrants, last for only about 2 years. And the question might be, there's many questions, one of them might be, what happens to a deposed alpha male? And the answer is the same rules apply as in Canberra. She says, it depends on their personality. Some become the shadow of their former selves. Some retreat to the back bench, lick their wounds and try another day. So what are our natural instincts? At my workshop on Saturday, we'll go through these in some detail, and in my book I describe each one, the science, and also how to use them. And the one that I wanted to touch on today, and I should give credit for this, another hero of mine, Professor Nigel Nicholson from London Business School. It was his original work, and then I've built on and extended his work and applied them. And one of the favourite things I get to do is take business leaders to zoos to make sense of us as a species. I just want to talk about one, which is that quick impression to judge. And once we know this, the value of perhaps suspending judgment. I'll show you the next slide ever so briefly, about half a second. And if we said, what did you pick up in that scene? People would get it very accurately. It was serving coffee, a happy scene. If I said what sort of coffee, people would say cappuccino. The great purpose of our quick impressions to classify, which serves us well, is these quick impressions to judge is in order to classify. We make sense of things, our experience, all this stimuli which hits us every moment of the day. We make sense by classifying, and we classify into binary alternatives such as good or bad. That was good coffee, that was bad coffee. I like that person, don't like that person. That's warm, that's cold. That's good news, that's bad news. We can use this, and I just want to, even in the time, touch on just one thing. We can use this at times when we want to be understood, at times when we want to persuade and influence. Then in being understood, we really want the listener to classify that A, they get our idea, and B, if it's a moment of persuasion and influence, to classify it and agree that it's a good idea. The speed in which we do so and the capacity of the working memory of the brain is that we've only got 2 seconds in which to be understood or in which to influence and persuade before the listener jumps to their own conclusions and classifies for themselves, which may or may not be. So the next time you want to persuade someone at work, the next time you want to influence someone, think about this technique, which is I've only got 7 words. Because if we leave our key point, often the emotional point, lower into the discussion, could be way into it for humans, 30 seconds, we've missed our opportunity and the person will have classified. And once classified, it takes an awful amount to change our minds. We then start filtering what we're hearing, experiencing and observing based on the conclusion that we might well have jumped to. Here's an example, which is, I use this example because it's the benchmark of a fantastic first 7 words. So the situation is that when Tony Abbott became the opposition leader at the time of the then emissions trading or reduction scheme, he won, obviously, the leadership of the opposition based on opposing that idea, and he holds his first press conference. Now, he's talking beyond the press to the electorate, and he's not really talking to people who have absolutely made up their mind one way or the other. What does he say? And he absolutely nails it in his first 7 words, and he alters that dynamic in the direction in which carbon trading or emissions trading at that time took. If you don't remember his exact 7 words, even the greater point, what you would sort of remember because of the emotion attached to it. And he said, it's a great new tax on everything. That was his key proposition, his first few words. And there's obviously one critical emotional point in there, which is a very simple word, tax. And it caused so many in the electorate to go, oh, I hadn't thought of it like that, I better pay attention. And that becomes his narrative. So at workplaces, let alone in your personal life, when you want to be understood, when you want to persuade or influence, and of course, if we, at times when we're not getting the people's drift, the person's drift, we're seeking, you mean, is that like good news? Is that what you're telling me? We're checking back to say, am I classifying this correctly? When you're putting an idea, when you're seeking to persuade, you're making a request. An email, have you ever received an email where it was a long email and you couldn't make sense of it, which would be you weren't able to really classify? The next time you're sending an email, and it doesn't have to be a very long one, is to think about what am I going to say in those first few words to allow the person to classify and make sense of my point, which allows the person to make sense. That's why newspapers have headlines. In the first few words, we can make sense, i.e. classify what this article's about as we start to read. Phone calls, you make a phone call. And what is it the person's going to hear and understand? Get your drift immediately. One that we often face at work, back to that original list, is having a performance review. Let's say you're the employee, you come in to have your annual performance review, or one of your loved ones will be heading off to work. Today is their performance review. From an individual's point of view, the staff member, to make sense of this review, obviously very much on their mind is just that simple binary alternative. Is this going to be a good review? Or am I in strife and is this going to be a bad review? To be an empathetic and sensitive manager, in your first 7 words, you would make it very clear what sort of review this is going to be. What you would not say, and the number of times in work life that my boss said this to me, or you might have heard it, you might have experienced this, tell me how you think you went this year. That's 7 words. Of course, in the staff member, being the attentive, defensive, self-protective, emotional being, is at that moment unable to classify. Not able, we'd be trying to pick up other clues from the person. from the boss. And for the moment in which I'm unable to classify, I am anxious. I had a good year, boss. I had a good year. I had a great year. What could the boss say just to make this a much more happier and productive experience? And this is obviously just one example of very many in our daily work lives. The boss might say, and almost always the boss is doing a good review, someone who performed well. So why not say, you've had a terrific year, or congratulations on the last 12 months, or I'm looking forward to this good review. So the value of understanding human instincts is that we come into the world as a member of a social being. There's 7 basic behaviours in this framework that A, helps us understand why we and others behave and act the way as we do, which third, that's first. Second, gives us a predictable framework of understanding and predicting ours and others' behaviour, so that C, most importantly, we can then make informed and wise choices. Thank you.
The 2 women I'm about to introduce to you, I believe, are 2 of the most talented broadcasters in this country, and I believe they broadcast happiness. Angela Catterns and Wendy Harmer are an example of a powerful friendship in a workplace and in the world of the media where that isn't always the case. Would you please make them welcome Ange and Wendy Harmer.
Oh, hello there and welcome. My name's Angela Catterns.
And I'm Wendy Harmer. It's great to be with you this afternoon. The weather.
Traffic?
Yeah, traffic, weather, and we'll be hearing from the police just shortly.
That's right. It's very humid.
You probably know us from the radio. I mean, how many folk have heard Ange and I warbling away over the summer on 702
Oh, only
breakfast.
2 or 3 listeners.
Well, that's what we do.
Oh, yes, 4 or 5.
Angela and I broadcast together, and I think we're the only female radio double act in Australia. They've just put on Chrissy Swan and Jane Hall in Melbourne on an FM station. I've been writing all this last week about how in radio it's regarded as a very, very brave move to have 2 women on the radio together.
It's radical, isn't it?
Radical. And in fact, a TV executive told me, he said just last year, he said, you've got to understand it, Wendy, from the man's point of view. He said, you've been nagged by one woman all weekend and you turn on the radio and you get nagged by 2. So that's why we can't put 2 women on the radio. So that's on commercial, but Angela and I, of course, have been working on the ABC.
That's right. And the other thing that we get criticism for is for laughing on the radio. When, you know, 2 women laugh on the radio, we're often criticised as being giggling Gerties, as if we've stepped over some kind of line. I don't know if either of you have listened to the cricket, the ABC's cricket coverage. Does Kerry O'Keefe mean anything to you? Talk about a giggling Gertie.
Yes. But anyway, that's our little political announcement before we go on. What we thought we might do is Angela and I both wrote a piece about each other, and we thought we would begin by reading you the piece that we wrote about each other, and then we'll move on from there. It should answer very many questions. So this is me to Angela. When Angela Catterns was broadcasting from the foyer of ABC 702, sitting amid the skeins of wool and the goodly knitters of Sydney, I'm pretty sure I was encouraging my listeners at Today FM to eat a cockroach for State of Origin tickets. I did try to explain to Ange that the cockroach had been fed on peanut butter by its handler for weeks, and it was a bit like eating a caramello koala, but she's never bought it and she never will. In the summer of 2005, I was working at the ill-fated Titanic of radio, which was known as Vega. I don't know whether anybody knows that, as was Ange. And my greatest joy listening was listening to Ange on the breakfast shift as I drove across the bridge to the station in Pyrmont. She was warm and wise and had a voice that could melt a caramello koala from behind the try line at home Homebush.
Oh.
And that laugh, well, of course, everyone in Sydney loves to hear Angela laugh. I resolved to work with her, and because she was at the same radio station as me, surely I could swing it. Oh, no, we can't have two women on the radio together. And the bloke, you remember who it was? He completely blanched. No. It was sort of like a chant from George Orwell's Animal Farm. 2 blokes, good. 2 women, 4 breasts, bad. So some years after much wrangling, Ange and I ventured into the brave new world of the ABC, and we were given our own podcast, which was called Is It Just Me? And I hadn't really talked to Angela until we sat down in front of that microphone and for that weekly podcast. I thought I was getting to know her while she was quietly unravelling me, often to helpless laughter or pathetic tears. And I learnt that there's an audience of all ages and genders who find it actually quite tolerable to listen to the travails and triumphs of 2 women of a certain age. I learnt that beyond the shock and awe of politics and celebrity, there's much to be discovered in the minutiae of life, and often that's where we find most of our connection. I also learned that sometimes you can hear a voice you admire and with perseverance convince them to enter into a conversation with you. Ange teaches me to listen. I find her take on the world challenging, honest and refreshing. And of all the people I've worked with, she probably makes me laugh the most.
Which is funny for a non-comedian,
well,
isn't
that's
it?
right. And I was actually on the Mardi Gras float with Julian Clary for 3 hours, and he didn't make me laugh once.
Wendy and I both had parallel careers in breakfast radio. Wendy was on 2Day FM for a long time with a team of blokes, of course, and I was on 702 ABC Sydney doing their breakfast show for a number of years, and both of us went to #1 in our various positions. Wendy went to #1 on 2Day FM.
Yeah, we both beat Alan Jones in the ratings.
Woo! And what happened when you went to #1, Wendy?
Well, I was given a very, 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 very large bonus, enough to buy a new car. And Angela...
And when I went to #1, the then managing director of the ABC came downstairs and he had a $12 bottle of champagne. And he said, "Well done, Ange."
And Angela, every time we're out anywhere, she brings that up. Still looking for the sympathy vote, I think.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this is what I wrote about Wendy, you know, when we were talking about the 2 of us. I said that I'm so happy to have someone else with whom to compare and contrast the unmistakable signs of reaching a certain age and to do radio with. She's an old pro at radio, of course, and so am I. We've mentioned that we had parallel careers for decades without actually knowing each other. And it was during and after the unfortunate failed experiment that was Vega that we finally met and clicked. Our 2 series of podcasts for the ABC has been some of the most enjoyable and rewarding work that I've ever done. Wendy makes me own up to things I've previously been too shy or embarrassed to talk about. She knows my age, my real age. For some reason, I find I'm unable to lie to Ms. Harmer. She knows I sometimes read my laptop on the toilet. She knows about my ego-destroying bra shopping experience, during which I was forced to buy a bra which encases my lymph nodes. And like me, she's at a loss to understand why that's necessary. She also knows I don't wear belts anymore, and neither does she. You need a waist for a belt, of course. So we both find them pretty useless these days. A couple of mine have been put into service, you know, tying up a sleeping bag and to do up a rolled-up foam mattress, to which Ms. Harmer compares her own waist. Wendy astutely observes that we don't really have 2 breasts anymore. We have a bosom. And she listens patiently to my endless rants about the size of prams today and how they're totally out of proportion to the babies inside them. Wendy is a very funny woman, as I'm sure you know. Working with her has taught me a valuable lesson. Always take a hanky into the studio. We end up laughing so much I have tears rolling down my face on a regular basis and snot running out of my nose. And before Wendy, I would have been far too embarrassed to say that word. We also both shed many tears at the feedback that we receive from listeners all over the world for whom we've really struck a chord. So Wendy and I are definitely not grumpy old women. We're just women of a certain age with opinions who love to laugh.
Now, I suppose that we should get back to the reading the laptop on the toilet, and I see you brought this stinky thing with you. Have you?
Who uses their laptop or their iPad on the toilet, ladies and gentlemen?
No, I'm sorry.
Show of hands, own up.
No, I'm sorry.
You see, I'm so not alone.
That's taking multitasking to you know, to a level that it never should be at. No, we can't multitask. That's no good.
What about talking on the telephone on the toilet? I was in a hotel this week and I noticed, you know, they install a telephone right beside you. Why is it okay to do that in all hotels, but not to take your laptop?
I think you're supposed to be talking to people outside. I think you're just supposed to be sort of talking to the intercom in the other room, or in case you run out of toilet paper or something. You're not supposed to be.
That's not right.
The other thing that the other topic there that Angela mentioned that I should actually tell you, that Angela, I know how much Angela's breasts weigh.
That's because I told her, because I weighed them. One by one.
Tell everyone why.
Because I wanted to lose weight and I wanted to find out how much my breasts were contributing to my overall weight.
This is the most
it's
hilarious
true.
thing.
See, I'm seeing.
This is the most hilarious thing about Angela. Angela has been, she admitted recently, she's been on the diet 4 years and she's lost 1 kilo. I love it.
Is that not what life is like?
It's too funny.
Dear.
So
yes,
we do know quite intimate things about each other, I must say. What we should do is... I'm not even going to go about into the size of prams. Now, Angela is, she comes
into
over,
the size of prams.
Well, she comes over as a quite tolerable and charming sort of person on the air. But actually, she does display a few sort of... nannerish tendencies. She's a terrible eavesdropper. She hangs around. Remember those two people you eavesdropped in the grocery store?
Yeah, that's right.
She listens to people's conversations and comes in and repeats them to me. And she admonishes people quite a lot. And she also complains about the size of prams. And she also, which she won't tell you, parks. This is... Because she doesn't agree that young women should have such large pram-like appliances, Angela parks in their spaces designated in the shopping mall.
Thank you. Thank you, exactly.
And your reasoning is because...
Because they didn't have them when I was a mother of a young child. You know, I'm getting my due here, ladies and gentlemen. I'm getting my due. But look, let's just back up to prams. I mean, seriously is that about? These huge modern prams that are, you know, 1 metre wide, and your average baby is this big. What is that about? Obviously, the pram has become a status
they're clogging
symbol.
up your trendy cafe. That's the only thing that, you know, is the problem.
No, that's not true.
What we thought we might do is we have got a whole lot of funny letters here from doing our podcast. We did a series called, we did a couple of series called Is It Just Me? And then we did, what was the one we did for Radio National?
It's News to Me.
And then we did one on that's on my website, The Hoopla, and then
.com.au.
and they are called In the Loop with Wendy and Ange. So I thought we might read you some of the feedback and some of the topics that people have raised, and we shall expand further. So, Lisa says, I have just recently discovered your podcast, and like everybody else, I just love it. Look, I'm reading these out because it really is interesting, because all these people tell us how they laugh, out, you know, where they're laughing, and how it actually disturbs everybody around them, and how they feel so strange when they laugh. And it really is an interesting insight on the fact that we don't really do a lot of public laughing. So, you know, it sounds like might be a bit self-aggrandising, but there's a point to it. I made people wonder on the River Cat as I laugh out loud, or almost convulse while trying not to. I think it is amazing that you can have us in hysterics 1 second and almost in tears as you share deeply personal stories from your lives. Thank you. Thanks, Wendy, for the game idea, Hospitals with Mama as the patient. And Ange, I have loved listening to you since the morning show on Triple J, which is why I am prepared to forgive you for your anti-pram stance.
And big car stance, you edited that bit out.
We must have raved on about this as well. Have you tried to fit 3 children and all the food they can eat in a small car?
Well, yes.
Well, the game Hospitals with Mama was a little game that I invented when the children were young for when I had a hangover. And so what the game was Mum is in intensive care. And I used to get the kids to build an oxygen tent out of blankets over the top of me and then bring me food and drinks. And look, until I felt better. Do you know there's nothing like a very small child's hand on your forehead?
Yeah.
To actually cure a hangover. That is true. You should try it. Come on, just put your hand there, darling, and that makes Mummy feel better. So that was my game that I invented.
That was very lovely.
Okay.
This was an email that we were sent by Perry, who wrote, surprisingly, we seem to appeal to a lot of men, which is fantastic because, you know...
Well, we remind them of their aunties. Mad aunties.
Well,
I think.
Maybe. Anyway, Perry wrote, I was sitting in traffic listening to the tweezers over the scrotum episode, crying with laughter, people in other cars staring at this middle-aged man on his own in a car, lying over the steering wheel in hysterics. So perhaps you will illuminate us and recount the tweezers over the scrotum episode.
Well, I was talking about the depth of love between a husband and wife. That's how I like to think of it. That my husband had been working in the yard and he got a whole lot of ticks in his scrotum. And he trusted me to take them out with tweezers. And I just thought that was the most great and deep expression of our trust for each other. And the fact that I'm able to tell you now is another expression of that. Tell you all, and I'll go home and say, everyone at the town hall loved the scrotum story.
Yeah. And he'll be so thrilled that you've taken it out again. You've taken the story out again and given it a bit of an outing.
Take the story out for an outing, or his scrotum.
No, the story. And the scrotum.
I don't take his... I tend to leave his scrotum with him, you know, sometimes. But I must admit that when we do go out, sometimes we do share one brain. And, you know, like are you going to have the brain this evening or shall I? That kind of thing. Yeah. Okay, what's the next letter here?
Shirley raises an interesting topic.
Shirley, here's a great topic. I can't thank you enough for the pleasure you're bringing me. It's now possible for me to tackle my ironing without reaching for the Sauvignon Blanc. There we go. I just plug myself into your podcast and the minutes fly by. Having just purchased a car which assaults me with its incessant beeping at every opportunity, your discussion on this topic caused me to laugh so much I almost peed my pants. Thanks, girls. You're doing me the world of good. Here's the thing. Who's got a car? You know, you don't put your seatbelt on.
That nags you.
We've all got one of those, aren't they?
They
so
just
annoying.
never stop nagging.
And it's like being nagged to death. Well, I was sitting there the other day at the computer, you know, and everything these days beeps, doesn't it? Everything beeps.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting at the computer and I hear beep, 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 beep. And I thought, have I left the fridge open? Is that the iron?
Is that a truck reversing?
Is that a truck reversing down the back street? Is it the smoke detector? Has one of the kids left a computer on? Is it the washing machine's out of balance? Have I left the car door open? Is it the microwave? Is something about to burst into flames, for Christ's sake? I was just reflecting on the amount of things that beep. And Angela, you should tell them about your washing machine.
Oh, the washing machine. My darling washing machine plays a tune at the end of the cycle. Does anyone have that machine?
And Angela thinks it might be the Korean national anthem.
I thought it was the Korean. After extensive research, that's been disproved, that theory of mine.
Apparently it's a bit of Bach.
No, Haydn.
Haydn.
It's a piece by Haydn. I thought it was the Korean national anthem because, of course, it's a Samsung, you know.
But it's Haydn. Why would you put Haydn in your... except that there was some socks Haydn in there. Oh, anyway. No. Let's move on. I think how much we've got? We've got a little bit of time left here for another topic. What other topic have we got, Ange?
Well, there's I like this one from Norm. He says, when I get together with people, all we seem to do is complain about the world and find fault with other people. I suppose in my mid-60s, wrote Norm, I am a grumpy old man, but not an amusing grump. You both have a love of life that is infectious, and listening to you makes me happy to still be alive, even when you talk about serious topics like female body parts.
We're not having no idea what these female body parts.
Maybe it's the lymph nodes inside the bra.
This is what Ange really seriously went for a bra fitting, and tell them what with the lady with the
Well, of course, you know, you think you're maybe 32B, maybe 34C.
Oh, used to be.
That's right. Anyway, I'm ending up with something ending in E. And the woman who fitted me, who's respectable and has her own store that apparently does very, very well, explains to me that it has to go right around under my armpits and encase my lymph nodes within. So, you know, the whole one cup is about this big. And I swear, it keeps going halfway around my back.
And I couldn't help thinking how sexy that sounded. Come on, dolls, give us a look at your lymph nodes. You know, there's this horrible image of peeling off your bra, and I don't know whether your lymph nodes sprawling out or what the hell. Or
that's right.
If they get bigger as you get older, or I don't know what the point about that is. But we don't we don't seriously talk about body parts very often. We do talk about our children quite a lot. We talk about our mums and our families and all sorts of things. We've made each other cry quite a lot. Shall we go on to Kerry and Kelly to finish up, Ange?
All right, let's do that.
You might go with Kerry.
All right. So this was an email from Kerry who wrote, I've just returned from hospital and want to tell you that my hideous recovery was not helped by having discovered your podcasts. Having had my right shoulder operated on, jiggling with laughter only hindered the recovery process as I drifted in and out of painkiller heaven. My first night at home had my husband waking in fright, thinking I was suffering some post-op seizure as I tried to suppress my laughter. I'm living in Switzerland, which only has 2 national jokes. It used to be 1, but I think we had a referendum to allow a second. Anyway, she says, it's been a long time since Laugh Out Loud laughs. I've sent you off to all my friends who also need a good laugh. Funny, when you've got everything you want, all I dream of is coming home. Westfield shopping centres, mowing grass on a Sunday, packets of sliced bread, and waiters who pour the same amount of wine into women's glasses as men's.
There you go. That's from a sad expat. I've got to just tell one little story here, Ange, about that painkiller heaven. When I was in the Mater Hospital, I'd just given birth to my son, and he was due to be born on Christmas Day, but he came a few days early, and I had a caesarean section, and so I was in the Mater recovering from this, and it was Christmas Day. So I was lying there because I demanded pethidine at every 5 minutes. Like, oh, I've got a bit of pain, nurse, I think I need more pethidine, I really do. So I was having a whale of an old time there. And there was one particular point in the evening where I woke up and I was in this sort of, you know, in my hospital room there with the snowy white counterpane and, you know, surrounded by beautiful flowers.
Counterpane. That's
yes.
A nice, quaint little turn of phrase, darling.
Thank you very much, Angela.
Did you get that from Granny Brown?
Pardon?
Did you get that from Granny Brown?
Yes, I did, from my nan. And anyway, so it was a beautiful, beautiful scene. And at the end of my bed in this snowy white scene were these people who were singing Christmas carols. And they were singing, "Oh, come, all ye faith." And I thought, Christ, I've died. I thought, oh, shit, I must have died during childbirth. And I looked over and I saw the baby and went, oh, thank goodness for that. Anyway, I should go on with the last letter that we have here because we've only got a few minutes left. It's from Kelly. I love your shows. It's wonderful ponderings on life, as we all know it. My only complaint is when I listen to your program, I'm usually on my way to work or on the way home. And as I march along with headphones in place through the grim city streets with my serious commuter expression in place, just like everyone around me, I inevitably end up giggling and grinning at the things you guys say. For the minor things, I can usually disguise my amusement with a hand across my face. But when it's something really funny, I end up looking like some nutter, grinning madly and bursting into giggles. Isn't there something wrong with society when we have to hide our happiness for fear that we'll seem a bit odd? So that's a lovely one. And we should finish up with Pete the Truckie. Pete the Truckie.
Pete the Truckie.
This is probably our favourite letter.
And he rings up whenever we do our stint over the summer on the breakfast show too, Pete the Truckie. And so this is what he's written. Hello, goddesses.